Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Executive Director of Global Programming and Events at the Milken Institute, Conrad Keishel.
Hello. Hey, everybody. Thanks for hanging in. I hope everybody's been having a great global conference and a wonderful day. We wanted to close out the day with two very important conversations. As some of you may have already noticed, although it is a global conference, we have had a strong interest in the U.S. political scene this year, both in our lunch today and in some of the sessions that have happened in the last 2 days. We've been honored and privileged to have representatives of the current administration as well as for the previous administration. And one thing that, as Mike Cloud reminded us in his lunch remarks this afternoon, the Milken Institute is very devoted to the values and the virtues of nonpartisanship. We truly believe in that, and that's an outgrowth of our belief that people talking with one another is, frankly, the root of almost every solution in the world. So again, we're honored to bring together leaders who not just represent that, but also walk the talk. And two of them we have with us for the next hour. So we've got two of the Democratic presidential candidates, former Governor John Hickenlooper of Colorado, and Representative Seth Moulton from Massachusetts. So the format for the next hour is going to be two kind of presidential conversations, if you will. First with Jerry Baker of the Wall Street Journal, editor-at-large of the Wall Street Journal, with Governor Hickenlooper, and then Christina Bellantoni and our friends at USC Annenberg leading the conversation with Representative Moulton. So I'll ask you to please join me in welcoming John Hickenlooper and Jerry Baker. Thank you.
Thank you, Conrad, and thank you all for joining us this evening. Governor, welcome. Thank you very much for being here. Have you been on the campaign trail the last day or so? Where have you been?
Pretty much non-stop if you go back. I looked at my calendar. It had been 22 days out of 27 days. No, 24 days out of 29 days I've been out of town and couldn't find any day where we didn't have at least 12 hours of opportunity.
It's grueling. Why do you do it?
You know, I don't know what it says about me as a human being, but I love it. I love being in someone's living room in New Hampshire or Iowa and having a small group of people at a certain point begin telling you their secrets and their wildest dreams. And it's an intimate, I mean, it's a blessing to see the soul of America.
So let me start by asking you, what's it going to take for a Democrat to defeat Donald Trump next year?
Well, it depends. If you go and talk to soybean farmers in Iowa, not much, right? One of their agricultural auditors says that the average soybean farmer in Iowa will need 8 consecutive good years to get back to where they were 2 years ago.
Because of the tariffs, right?
Yeah, the tariff wars, and it's not just farmers, right? We have all kinds of people that manufacture things and have components coming in and out of the country from different countries, and they're having to recreate their supply chains to maximize tax benefits and taking literally hundreds of millions of dollars when you add it up of investment into their supply chains and just completely organize it at all new cost.
Okay, you've got the soybean farmers, but with great respect to them, they may not be enough on their own to propel you to the White House. What does a Democrat... Look, President Trump's probably going to be campaigning in a reasonably strong economy, reasonably healthy economy. You may disagree with that, but it's pretty robust at the moment.
Sure.
He's got a good economy behind him. He's going to not be challenged by seriously, it doesn't look, for the Republican nomination. There are going to be 20 Democrats at least fighting it out. What is it going to take when you get through that process in November 2020 that people are going to say, for the first time in almost 30 years, to defeat an incumbent president? What's it going to take for a Democrat to be able to do that?
Well, I think we'll have to demonstrate and paint the picture clearly that just because you have record stock market highs doesn't mean the country's doing great. And when you go to each demographic group, the Gen Xers are in a position where they're faced with having to try and help their kids pay for college, or they're going to take care of their parents, but in neither case do they have the ability to save money. If you look at the millennials, I mean, people say, well, they don't really want to own a car. They're into transit, they don't need to own they're not trying to buy a house. Of course they want to buy a house. Of course they want to start a family. Of course they want to own a car. They are buried in debt. You go down each level, 80% of American families are having a hard time balancing their household budgets at the end of every month. That's not America. And I don't think when you step back and pull the curtains back and show the American people exactly what has happened to their future, right? We borrowed $1.5 trillion that's going to have to be paid by their kids and their grandkids. And what really did most Americans get?
But with respect, I hear every Democrat making that message that, that prosperity isn't shared. We're here talking about shared prosperity, that it's not shared. There are at least 20 Democratic candidates. How do you, Governor Hickenlooper, distinguish yourself in that field? What is it that makes Democratic voters in Iowa and New Hampshire say, he's the guy I'm going to vote for?
Well, I'm running for president because I look at our country, and I think we are in a national crisis. And it's a crisis it's a crisis of division. I don't think we've ever been this divided, probably all the way back until the Civil War, and it's keeping us from getting together and really resolving some of these big challenges. I look at what I did for 20 years as a small business person, 8 years as a mayor of Denver, 8 years as a governor, and I actually got people to come together and we got stuff done. And a lot of times it was people that didn't get along very well. We expanded healthcare, so we got almost universal coverage in Colorado, but in a bipartisan way. We addressed methane emissions, which are methane 25 to 40 times worse than CO2 in terms of climate change. We were the one place where we got oil and gas to sit down with the environmental community, and they don't like each other. Just to be brutally frank, it's like it's like Coke and Pepsi. They hate each other, and yet we got them to, the oil and gas industry ended up investing $60 million a year, and it's the equivalent of taking 320,000 cars a year off the road. That's a model, right? Just having that happen in Colorado is just a start. I look at these things where we've gotten people to come together and really get stuff done. That's what America wants. There's an appetite for that.
Do you think capitalism is working well right now?
Well, I think that when I grew up, capitalism in America was a system wherein the middle class and even the working poor had both security and opportunity. If they worked hard and played by the rules, they could pull themselves up. But it's changed so dramatically in the last 30 years or 40 years. From 1946 until Reagan got elected in 1980, if you inflation adjust income, every man, woman, and child in this country just about doubled their income, except the very wealthy, and their income increased about 80%. And then government was awful, government was wasteful. There was all the trickle down, lower the taxes, get rid of the government. Since 1981, roughly 50% of Americans, inflation adjusted, are making less money than they made in 1981. That's not the America that anybody wants.
But you're a successful capitalist. You're a very successful business career. You built your own business. You got into a little bit of a flap earlier this year when you were asked whether you're a capitalist, and initially you seemed reluctant to say so. But you were, just for the record, you are a proud capitalist. Is that fair to say?
I am a proud capitalist.
There you go. I'm not pushing. I'm not.
No, but the point I was trying to make was, and maybe not very artfully, was that labels divide us, and you put into if you were to ask me if I was a nerd in high school, I would tell you, I would probably say that's not the first label I'd choose, but it'd be hard to argue with.
Yeah, but it's a serious point, isn't it? It's not just about a label. It's that so many in your party do seem to be very negative about capitalism, and I guess if I may be so bold as to put words into your mouth, I guess the reason you were kind of initially maybe reluctant to say you're a capitalist is because it does look as though you look at the polls, and half of Democrats apparently say they actually wouldn't want to try socialism. They want to try a completely different system. Isn't that where the party's heading?
Oh, no, I don't. I think most Democrats don't want to try socialism. They want to figure out some way that there could be a better partnership between government and business and nonprofits, right? That's where most really successful change happens, is that kind of three-legged collaboration that has helped change America again and again. I'm an entrepreneur. I've started 20 businesses, created 1,000 jobs. and we've revitalized communities in cities all across the Midwest. So we weren't just making a profit. But there has to be some changes to capitalism so it begins to work for everybody.
And I want to ask you about some of those specific issues and your own record as well as governor of Colorado. But let me just back to Trump for a minute. We've just seen the Mueller report, most of it anyway. Some of it's redacted, obviously, but we've seen quite a lot of it. We've seen a case that's been made by some of your colleagues. It's clear that some of your Democratic friends and colleagues in Congress want to pursue investigations. And at least one of the Democratic candidates, Elizabeth Warren, has said the president should be impeached. Do you think he should be impeached?
You know, I think it's more important at this moment, let's get the facts. Let's get an unredacted copy of the Mueller report that we can see, or at least get it to the congressional committee so they can see it unredacted. We should see as much as possible. I'd like to see Mr. Mueller and the Attorney General Bell, testify in front of Congress, right?
Do you think that, you talked about uniting the country and the need to unite the country, is an impeachment process going to unite the country?
Listen, I think it would probably be fairly divisive, but I think people have to be accountable. So let's get the facts, and think about what we do know for a fact that no one's arguing about. President Trump's campaign has admitted that they supplied their confidential polling information to a hostile foreign power, gleefully, as close as I can tell, and understood that this foreign power was going to try and engage in changing the outcome of an American election. That's what no one's arguing about that anymore. That to me is unthinkable. I just can't even imagine that we would have a president that acknowledges, sure, of course, that's the way you play the game.
And what about, I don't want to get too much detail of the Mueller report, but obviously the second half of the report was about obstruction of justice. Mueller did seem to punt it to Congress and to say, look, there's plenty of evidence here that the president may have obstructed justice, and this is under the Constitution. He can't be, under justice guidelines, he can't be charged, but he can be impeached, and that seems to be the implication of what he was saying. So that's the process. You think that process should go forward in the Congress, not necessarily impeachment, but an investigation of those specific charges.
Absolutely. Let's get the information and see where it takes us. Again, I think American people want accountability. And they've got every right and deserve it.
Do you think the president's fit for office, fit to be president of the United States, Mr. Trump?
You're talking about in terms of common decency?
In terms of his behavior, in terms of his character.
You mean the fact that he tries to divide people at every turn, takes national tragedies and uses them to his political advantage? I'd have to think about it.
Perhaps not for very long by the sound of things.
Don't try to provoke me.
But if the party, again, if the party does go down this the polling already is. We heard a panel at lunchtime today where the polls seem to be fairly clear that most independent voters are saying that's it. As far as they're concerned, the Mueller report, they want to draw a line under it. Isn't there a risk for Democrats if you go down this route, just as happened with Bill Clinton in 1998, that the independents will be turned off, and you'll rile up the Republican base, and independents will be turned off and say, I'm not willing to vote for a Democrat?
I think we have an obligation under the Constitution to get all the facts that we can and then make the best judgment we can. I think there are ways to do that there's a process by which we can do that would not be as divisive as perhaps it could be. But I do think we have an obligation to pursue the truth wherever it leads us.
Okay, let's move on to the policy issues we talked about, the economic policy issues. You just came out with a policy proposal last week to look at a much tougher antitrust. You favor a much tougher antitrust approach, saying that companies maybe become too big and too remote and there isn't enough competition in a lot of sectors. So would you favor, again, other candidates have said this, breaking up some of the big tech companies at Google, Amazon?
I came at this through the lens of an entrepreneur, right? And I started a bunch of little businesses. And one thing that concerns me deeply is the level of startups. Now, I'm not talking in tech. Tech's doing great. There's lots of venture capital. But look at the people that historically have started bakeries or sheetrocking companies or go down the list. We've always had a healthy startup culture of small businesses. That's been going down now for more than a decade. And a number of different arguments of what's causing that. But certainly one argument is that there are, in so many industries, just 3 or 4 companies that dominate the entire industry, and those entrepreneurs, those would-be entrepreneurs, are looking at the landscape and saying it's probably too competitive. I'm well paid now. I'm a good performer where I am. Why should I take that risk? And what we're saying is, let's go look at what happened back in 1981 when we stopped collecting data about competition. They made a decision that, well, as long as consumer prices seem to be low and consumers are getting a good deal, then we don't care about competition. Well, my argument is we do care about competition. Competition is essential to having successful capitalism.
Would you favor that? Would you favor a breakup of, say, Google?
Well, I think we have to go through the process with each company. Again, I'm not one to try and demonize one industry or one company or another, but I do see again and again and again, and it's in many industries, where we've had this amazing consolidation and an aggregation of power and influence that, and there are other reasons that small businesses aren't being started. There's more red tape now, bureaucracy that's probably needless that we could, one of the things we did in Colorado is we went through all 24,500 rules and regulations, and we either eliminated or simplified over 11,000, almost half. And we could feel it, that just talking about it was a way to encourage entrepreneurs and get them to open the valve and begin, creating a business plan, looking for capital, starting a business.
I'm sure that's a message that resonates with a lot of people here. What about the financial sector? A lot of people in your party are very unhappy still with 10 years on from the financial crisis. They don't think enough accountability was held. Banking system's in stronger shape, but the banks are bigger than they were before. They seem to be too big to fail, even bigger than they were before. Is that something do you think the financial system needs fundamental review of its regulation as well?
I think we should always be reviewing our regulations because it's healthy. I think we should be getting rid of red tape.
But are you worried are these banks too big to fail again? I mean, are we in danger of repeating what we went through 10 years?
I think almost anybody hates the sense of too big to fail. That's again, the antithesis of what we want to see in our business community. I was much more concerned about all those regulations that stifled small banks, because small banks are the main source of not the family and friends that are the first source of investment, but that first loan you get where you want to grow, you need a small bank. You don't need JP Morgan Chase. So are some banks too big to fail? I don't know. They're certainly based on their balance sheets and their stress tests. They're stronger and in better condition to weather some serious adversity than they have been before. Should they be broken up? Again, we'd have to go through a process and make an evaluation. But I do think what happened last spring, where we had bipartisan support to change some of Dodd-Frank and begin to loosen up some of the regulations on small banks, that should go further. We want more flow of capital to the people that are just getting ready or just beginning to start a business.
What about trade? It seems to me the president has rather stolen the Democrats' clothes on trade. Democrats tended to be historically a bit more skeptical, more supportive of workers' rights, concerned about cheating by other countries. The president comes in, renegotiates NAFTA, renegotiates with Korea, is in the late stages, we think, of renegotiating with China. Hasn't he actually won that argument?
Yeah, as long as you didn't have any money invested in all those companies that have been harmed by the tariff wars.
Soybean farmers, you said earlier.
Soybean farmers, let's see what happens. The predictions now for bankruptcies in the agricultural sector, cheese makers and dairy producers are going to be under tremendous stress. I go down the whole list. I think his tariff wars have been a dismal failure. And I agree. Hey, I'm the first person that says Russia, China, they're adversarial. And China was cheating on their agreements, stealing intellectual property. We had to address that. But a tariff war should be at the end of a long series of diplomatic efforts. And you should have...
But we've had that. I mean, to be fair, didn't President Obama for 8 years and President Bush for 8 years try to get China to change? Endless Chinese dialogues and structural dialogues and back and forth for 16 years. They didn't do anything. President Trump comes in, slaps on tariffs, and it looks as though the Chinese are making a difference.
You mean they're putting huge tariffs on our imports and exports.
Well,
sure,
we'll see what happens, but again, we don't know. But certainly with NAFTA, he got a renegotiated NAFTA, right? Didn't he? He got more favorable terms for American businesses in NAFTA.
Right. I'm a believer in trade, right? And I think all trade has the potential for winners and losers. And our job is to make sure that we're minimizing, making sure there are as few losers as possible, and making sure that employees in those companies get second chances, right? Again, if you go back to the 80s and 90s and look at one of the great failures, I think, that we made, and I'd argue that it's government malpractice, we didn't retrain anybody, and we didn't get out ahead of it. With automation and artificial intelligence, we're going to go through the same kind of workplace dislocation that we saw in the 80s and 90s. And this time, we should start and have systems, whether it's community colleges or all the different ways that people can learn skills. We've been partnering with Microsoft on a thing called Skillful.com and the Markle Foundation. But we've got to start giving kids of all ages the chance to acquire more and more skills and get ready so that they have choices if their profession begins to weaken, and that they look at, like I did when I got laid off. When I got laid off as a geologist, thousands and thousands of geologists were getting laid off. No one was hiring them. There was no market for a geologist. That's going to happen again and again here. And I think that's what President Trump is ignoring and not really dealing with and investing in. And I think at all of our communal risk.
Okay, what about taxes? You're in front of an audience here, I suspect, of people who probably think they pay quite a lot of tax already. Are you going to be a bold Democrat and say to the audience here that maybe they could pay a bit more in tax?
Yeah, you guys probably should pay a little more.
But seriously, clearly this enjoys widespread support. The Democratic Party, taxes on higher income earners, taxes on wealth, maybe revisit some of the corporate tax cuts we've seen. Where do you stand on this?
Well, people are going to be very resistant to paying more taxes unless they believe the money will be spent more wisely than they feel it has been spent in the past. So things like infrastructure, Colorado is going to be the first state in America, I think, by the end of 2020, we'll have broadband in every city and town in the entire state of Colorado. That should be national. Those kinds of investments people will believe in. I think they will pay more taxes. We're looking at the issues around capital gains versus ordinary income. If someone is full-time just engaging in buying and selling assets, holding them long enough, but getting capital gain, are they really providing that much of a tax or a benefit to society that they deserve such a large tax benefit? If you can go back and look at the 20th century, in this country we were capital short. We didn't have enough financial muscle, and we had lots of human capital. Now it's just the opposite. We don't have enough human capital. We don't have the skills and the training necessary, and yet we were awash in financial capital. Maybe we should look at equilibrating that some way, and maybe we inflation adjust. So if someone holds an asset for 10 years, and obviously when they sell it, let's say they make 50% more money, but the money's not, it's been diminished by inflation. You do an inflation adjustment for that, the growth of the asset. There are ways to do this in a way that ultimately lead us back towards, here's my point. Businesses at all sizes have a vested interest, a self-interest in making sure our middle class grows. If our middle class isn't growing, our democracy is weakened. And that's what we've seen over the last 25 or 30 years. And everybody should be concerned.
So again, I don't want to pin you down here, but overall, you do think that you could raise tax rates on higher earners, or maybe on some wealth. Maybe you would favor somewhat higher taxes than where they've been cut to in the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think that the tax cut that President Trump pushed through was obviously a crowd pleaser among a very small crowd. When you look at $1.5 trillion over 10 years of basic money that was borrowed, the vast majority of it, roughly half of it's in the stock market, and about a third of the stock market is owned by foreign individuals, foreign countries. My gosh, that's a pretty big, what's that, $400 billion that we gave to people that don't live here. I'm not sure American people are that excited. However much we believe in globalization and building better relationships with foreign countries, that's a bit far.
One area where Democrats want to spend more money is on green infrastructure. There's been a lot of talk about the Green New Deal, and one particular aspect of that, of course, is on the revenue side, is a carbon tax. Would you favor a carbon tax?
Well, I think we have to look at, I'm not sure, a carbon tax or some incentive to make sure that we're using less carbon. There's a number of different ways of doing this. I think we should look at the places where the market forces are lining up in favor of a cleaner energy system. And again, this is something, I got a master's in geology, and I know science isn't perfect, but...
And you did spend a lot, I know this is one of the things you spent a lot of time on as governor.
Absolutely, and we're closing 2 electric generation plants in Colorado right now that are going to be replaced by solar, wind, and batteries, no natural gas, and the monthly electric bill for all those consumers is going to go down. And I think those places where we can clearly see that people have lower prices and we're going to have dramatically less emissions, less carbon emissions, that's the place where we've got to really push. But we've also got to look at places like large manufacturing, like agriculture, where we also have lots of emissions, and we haven't quite figured out those economically viable systems and figure out how do we address those as well. But as a country and as a planet, we really do have to get our arms around the climate change issue in real time. Like they're saying 10 or 12 years, that's probably not an outrageous number to be thinking about.
A couple of other quick policy issues, particularly as they relate to Colorado. Colorado was one of the first states to decriminalize marijuana. Marijuana is now free, not just for medical. How's that working out?
Well, as you know,
don't look at me.
I'm
not sure what you're suggesting there.
I wasn't making an implication about consumption. I was just saying that I opposed it. Most every elected person in Colorado opposed it. But most of what for the vast majority of instances, what we most feared hasn't happened. We have not seen a spike in consumption among teenagers. We have not seen a dramatic increase in people driving while high. I guess I still believe that states are the laboratories of democracy, and I think that we should make sure that we don't ram this down. If it turns out that this system is better, I mean, the old system was a train wreck. We sent millions of kids, most of them low-income kids, and we took already difficult lives and we made them, by making them felons, we made those lives impossibly more difficult. But I don't think we should tell Maine, the federal government shouldn't tell Maine or Alabama or someone else that they should legalize it, but the federal government should decriminalize it. The federal government should allow those states that choose to use medical marijuana, whatever, they should allow them to bank and use the banking system. And we should also decertify it as a Schedule I narcotic so that we can do testing. And why is it the FDA, the Federal Drug Administration, out there doing longitudinal studies on finding out what types of autism or seizures that different types of marijuana or cannabinoids are most effective for. So let's take the places where we need the federal government to step in and make a system that works, but let other states make their own final decision.
And as you say, it was a popular vote. You opposed it. You're not concerned about any political implications in this race or in the general election. It's not, if I may put it like this, it's not going to be a cloud over your head, is it?
It's like that character in the comic strip Peanuts where they had Pigpen always had the cloud.
Pigpen, yes.
No, we did the best. You know, again, I opposed it, but 55 to 45, our voters approved it. And so my job is to go and make sure that I do everything humanly possible to see if it can work. And it's not perfect. We still got a little bit. This year, actually, we think we might have gotten rid of the black market in Colorado. Now, people might still be growing it and selling it out of state. But I think it's pretty hard to argue that the present system in Colorado is worse than what was there before.
Let me quickly ask you, and one other quick issue as well, which I know is of concern, particularly in Colorado, guns. And in fact, you know, we just heard again within the last hour, there does seem to have been another mass shooting tonight, I think in North Carolina. Some fatalities, we're still getting details of it, for another very tragic incident. You had obviously Columbine in Colorado. You've had a lot of issues with guns. What's your position? Again, this another mass shooting, more the attack at the synagogue again last week. There's going to be presumably much more attention on this. What needs to be done? What's a sensible gun control policy for the country?
Well, I think you start with universal background checks, and this notion that the NRA is out pushing that crooks aren't stupid. They're not going to get a background check. After we had the shooting in Aurora in the movie theater in it was June July 20th of 2012. And when we came back into our legislative session the next January, the first thing we did was put $30 million towards mental health. But that clearly is a component. Many of these shootings are forms of suicide. There's a real mental health issue. That being said, A, we need to keep guns out of the hands of dangerous people, and B, crooks are stupid, right? And so we went and got the statistics. We were getting to about 50% of the gun purchases in Colorado. And we went back and said, what are our local statistics? What do we show? Not the national statistics, but in a state with 5.5 million people, did we catch anybody? And I'll memorize these statistics forever. We had 38 people convicted of homicide who tried to buy a gun, and we stopped them. 133 people convicted of sexual assault. Well, I mean, you go to add them all up, it was 3,000 people convicted of violent crimes, tried to buy a gun, and we stopped them, but we were only getting to half the gun purchases. And in the end, 140 people who showed up to pick up their new gun, we arrested them for an outstanding warrant for a violent crime. Crooks are that stupid, right? I mean, so I don't see how anyone...
That's reassuring.
Once we got those local statistics, exactly, it isn't reassuring at all. But it means you want universal background checks, first and foremost. And once we got those local statistics, even the most conservative Republican legislators in our General Assembly backed away from trying to repeal universal background checks.
Final question, because we're out of time, but as you come up, as the campaign really gets going now, you've got the debates coming up starting in June, there's a lot of fundraising going on, the primaries will be next year. What is it that's, somebody once said that it takes, for a candidate like you who's not been, not Bernie Sanders and not Joe Biden, not the front runners right now, but you can become, with a moment, something can happen that can propel you to the front of the field. What's going to be that moment for you?
Well, my wife thinks it'll be if everyone gets to hear me sing. As anyone who's heard me sing knows that's not the truth.
We have 20 seconds. Do you want
to
give us a couple of
them? I think it was meant and intended as a joke. I think I am the only person out there, both as I said, as a small business person, but also as a mayor and a governor, who's actually been able to get things done. And I feel absolutely certain I can beat Donald Trump, but more importantly, I can bring us together on the other side and address things like the inflation of healthcare, not just universal coverage, but that inflation, climate change, and how do we address it with a sense of urgency? How do we deal with automation and artificial intelligence and make sure we're prepared so that people that might lose their jobs are already getting new skills to be ready? That's the kind of stuff that this country needs, and I think if I just go door to door, Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Nevada, I honestly feel every time I'm talking to people, I feel them leaning in. And I think if I can get the message to them, Hickenlooper.com, you can donate online. If I can get that message out, I think that there's an appetite for someone who's actually gotten stuff done.
Ladies and gentlemen, Governor Hickenlooper's got a very busy schedule. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks, Governor. Very good to see you. Thank you.
For part 2 of this session, please welcome Director of USC Annenberg's Media Center, Christina Bellantoni, in conversation with U.S. Representative of Massachusetts, Seth Moulton.
Thank you, Congressman. Hello. Hi, everyone. We're going to jump right into it because I know it's been a long day here.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
You are a Democratic congressman from Massachusetts. You won your seat in a primary, defeating a fellow Democrat, and you are one of many running for president, as we discussed in the introductions. One thing that you've been out there talking about in your campaign is your experience. You are a Marine veteran. You did you did 4 tours in Iraq, if I'm right?
Did, yeah.
And I think we were just talking offstage a little bit about how personal that experience has been, what you have seen veterans go through after both the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I wonder, how do you approach that on the campaign trail? And how are you framing that as a reason why people should choose you in this primary?
First of all, thank you very much for having me. It's an honor to be here. Iraq was a deeply personal and life-changing experience for me. I had a lot of problems with the war. I didn't agree with the war, and yet every single day I was there, I was able to have an impact on the lives of other people. And I felt like I saw the best of America in the worst of circumstances. So for all the problems of the Iraq War, for all the tragedies that it has created, it was an inspiring experience to serve with so many young people who so believe in America that they're willing to literally risk their lives to make it better. And that's the enduring lesson that I take from Iraq, from my time there, that this is not a perfect country. We got a lot of problems in America today, and we are a deeply divided country. But when you see that spirit of service from young people standing up, willing to work to make it better, that gives you a lot of hope for the future. And in terms, your second question is just kind of what sets me apart. Well, there's just simply no one else in the race that has that experience. I think that one of the hardest things I've ever had to do in my life was get an incredibly diverse group of Americans, people from all across the country with different religious beliefs, different political beliefs, all united behind a common mission to serve America. And frankly, in such divided times here at home, I think that that's exactly the kind of leadership we need from the next president of the United States.
And what are you hearing from veterans when you're going to VFW halls and talking to American Legions in these early voting states?
Well, I'm hearing that a lot of veterans are frustrated. I met with the VFW crowd out in Nevada just this past weekend, and a lot of them are not able to get the health care that they deserve at the VA. This is an experience I know personally because I made a commitment to continue getting my own health care at the VA even as a member of Congress. I said, as long as my fellow Marine veterans are out there going to the VA, I'm going to go there too. And it's been a rough ride. Shortly after I got this job, I got elected, I was moving my stuff down to Washington, and I had to have a minor surgery. I had a hernia from lifting. And I checked into the VA in Washington, D.C., not where I usually go, because I usually go to the hospital in Boston, gave them my Social Security number and my name, and about 20 minutes later they said, Seth, we can't prove that you're a veteran, so we'll consider taking you as a humanitarian case. Now, I just won this sort of high-profile election, so I wanted to say, maybe you could Google me. But I was not going to play the congressman's card. I was not there as a member of Congress. I was there as a veteran, as a Marine veteran. So I sat down in the waiting room next to a Vietnam vet who said, I've been waiting here for 5 hours. Now, fast forward, I got actually a great surgeon who was full-time at GW, but did work at the VA because she believed in taking care of veterans. She was there for all the right reasons. And she did a good job in the surgery, but when it was done, I picked up my medicines and went back to Capitol Hill. They said, when this anesthesia wears off, this is going to hurt, so you have some powerful painkillers. When I got back to Capitol Hill, I didn't take any of the pills because we had votes that afternoon, and I wanted to remember how I voted. But as the anesthesia wore off later in the day, I took one of the pills. They said, you can try taking one, you'll probably need 2. I took one, it really didn't make a difference. I went back to get the second pill and looked at the bottle, and they had sent me home with Advil. So even by the point, they had figured out by then that I was a member of Congress, they still sent me home with the wrong prescription from the pharmacy. I don't know that all of you here today want to be forced onto a government health care plan like that, and yet that's exactly what a lot of people in my party are calling for in this race. I think we should have some free market competition in healthcare where we have a public option like a modern Medicare for all, but it competes against private sector options as well. And if you like your private healthcare, we're not going to force you off it. We may force some competition in the market to lower prices, but we're not going to force you off your healthcare.
So I'm now a college professor after spending 20 years in journalism, and I spend a lot of time around 22-year-olds. And I can tell you that the top issue on their minds is this planet, climate change. And I'd like to know, what are your most concrete ideas for mitigating what effects we will see from climate change in our lifetimes?
Well, there's basically 3 categories of things that we need to do with regards to climate change. The first is we need to start providing some leadership here at home in America. That means reducing our carbon footprint, but also actually leading in green technology so that we set the rules of the road for the rest of the world. And when countries want to go buy green technology, they're not going to China, they're coming here to America. So that's the first thing. Restore leadership. Getting back into the Paris Accord is a very simple first step. The second thing that we need to do is we need to recognize that even if we do that here at home, it won't be enough, because there's so much carbon coming from the developing world, and that is taking off like a rocket. So we have got to develop technologies here at home that can be used not just here in America, but in the developing world. That means green distributed power for places like India and Africa. That is critical. And then the third thing we have to realize, which a lot of people are afraid to talk about, is that the level of carbon in the atmosphere already today is so high that we have to invest in decarbonization, in technologies to literally take carbon out of the air. Now, a lot of environmentalists don't want to talk about this, because when people hear that we have technology to take carbon out of the air, they think that we can just keep putting it in. No, we got to do both. But those are the three big things that we have to do. What I don't think we need to do is start a socialized work program here at home in America. And that's why I signed on to the Green New Deal when it was a framework, a signal that climate change is important and that we have to address it. But I'm releasing my own components of exactly how to do that.
And what about the theme of this conference, driving shared prosperity? Have you thought about what that would mean in a Moulton presidency?
You know, absolutely, because the reality is that for a lot of folks here, the economy is doing just great right now. And you hear people around this conference talking about how, well, you know, Trump's not the most moral leader, but his policies aren't that bad. The economy's doing pretty well. The Trump tax cut hasn't been all terrible for everybody. But that's not the story in many parts of America today. That's not the story for people who are working 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet. For the teacher who has to drive Uber in the evening to put food on the table. For the family that used to make a decent living wage in a manufacturing job and now works at McDonald's and doesn't ever have a dream of being able to simply go on vacation, and maybe their kids are addicted to opioids. So prosperity is not shared in America today, but there are things that we can do to fix it. The first is that we are going through a rapid economic change. That's why people are losing their jobs. And it's not immigrants who are taking their jobs, like Trump likes to say. It's robots, it's automation. Jobs are literally being automated out of existence, and we have to meet that with an educational revolution. We met the challenge of the Industrial Revolution by completely transforming our education system. It's time we did that today as well. What does that mean? It means more vocational training. It means respect for vocational jobs. It means we can talk about free college as an aspiration as Democrats, but let's start with the fact that 1 out of 4 kids in America doesn't even graduate high school. Those are the people that really need our help today. Second, we've got to make sure that infrastructure reaches all parts of America. That means rural broadband matters, because you should be able to compete for a job on the internet whether you live in downtown Chicago or on a farm in the middle of Kansas. And the third thing we have to do is we've got to make sure that the same capital that you have access to in places like startup havens in Massachusetts or Silicon Valley is available in Middle America as well. And there are people like Steve Case who are working on this. There are a lot of good ideas coming out of Middle America, but almost no venture capital going there to fund them. So there are concrete things that we can do to address this challenge. And we don't need to completely, we don't need to move towards a socialist system to do so. I'm very proud to be a Democrat, not a socialist, in this election. But we do have to take action. There's a lot of work to do and a lot of people who are being left out.
And obviously you've been here today, and I've been buried in grading papers, but there were some headlines out of a meeting the Democrats had with the president saying that there's some sort of loose agreement that they can move forward on an infrastructure plan. What do you know about that, and can you support something that President Trump supports?
Look, there's no question that we need to invest in infrastructure. And it's very hard to find anyone who disagrees with that. I mean, drive a couple miles and you'll come back as a fan in infrastructure investment. But here's the thing. Yes, we need to put more money into it. There's no disagreement there. But we've got to invest in next generation infrastructure. That means just repairing bridges and adding lanes to highways, which no other country in the world is doing right now, by the way, except for us. I mean, this is such a 1950s approach to infrastructure. That is not going to win the day. It's pathetic that when I go from Boston to Washington, I can't take a high-speed train every 15 minutes that would get me there in 2 hours. Every other developed country in the world has high-speed rail. There are so many developed countries in the world that are far ahead of us in broadband access. We need to fix that. So infrastructure is about 21st century access to jobs, not just restoring the system that we had in the 1950s.
So you are 7 months older than I am, among the youngest members of Congress, youngest presidential candidates. I'm curious, what do you think our generation has to offer a nation of baby boomers, who are the majority of voters at this point still, and what lessons have we learned from administrations past?
I mean, look, we wouldn't be here without the baby boomers. My parents are proud baby boomers. You know, they have a different perspective on some things. When I joined the Marines, my parents, who both protested the Vietnam War, were not thrilled. A local Boston paper interviewed my mother when I was headed to Iraq and said, "Oh, aren't you proud of your son for taking part in the war on terror and responding to the 9/11 attacks?" And my mom said, "I would only have been more disappointed in Seth if he had chosen a life of crime."
God.
Usually there are a lot of mothers out there who are saying, "I like your mom." So I wouldn't be here without the baby boomers. But I do think it's time for a new generation of leadership. Because I think that we have a new generation of challenges. I think we have a new generation of challenges in national security. That's why I talk a lot about replacing some of the old weapons systems with things like artificial intelligence, with cyber protections. We shouldn't be building a southern border wall to keep out immigrants. It's a pretty 5th century BC technology. We should be building a cyber wall to stop China from stealing our ideas every single day through the internet. I was talking to a Marine from my first platoon about this, about how the economy is changing so quickly, about how technology is changing so quickly. And he said to me, "You know, Seth, the problem is that everybody in Washington trying to figure this out are the same folks who had 12 a.m. flashing on their VCRs for 30 years. You know, I remember the Christmas that my brother and sister and I pooled our money and bought my parents a DVD player. And I think it's okay for a new generation to come along and say, you know, we are going to take this country forward. We are going to solve these new challenges. I think it's time for the tech generation to solve these tech challenges and to help show America how we can succeed in the new tech economy, not just the old manufacturing economy. I think it's time for the generation that went to Iraq and Afghanistan to replace the generation that sent us there. I think it's time for a new generation of leadership in American politics, and that's why I spent the last 2 years fighting across this country to take back the House. Of the 40 seats that we flipped to take back control of the House for Democrats, 21 of them were endorsed and supported by my Serve America team, my Serve America organization. But more than that, we were trying to get better, newer leadership into Washington. I supported a lot of veterans, people who understand what it means to put the country before political party, to put people before politics. I think this new generation of leaders can help. We're not all perfect. We don't have all the right ideas. But I do think it's time for us to stand up and lead.
So you came to Congress, if I'm correct, first in 2015, after the 2014 election. And you were in the minority for that period of time, and now have only been in the majority for a few months, and some of those were government shutdowns. So I understand this is a challenging question, but if you were to point to your proudest achievement since you've been there, what would it be?
As an individual in Congress, or as a party?
You.
Since we've been...
Yeah.
You know, this is the second job I've had in my life where I think every single day I'm able to impact the lives of other people. And I've often told folks that this is the second best job I've ever had, after literally being responsible for keeping an amazing group of Americans alive in the midst of a very difficult war. And so when I think about this question, I don't think about these sort of big policy achievements. We've passed some great bills. I got named the most effective freshman Democrat, which of course my friends always say, Seth, the bar is very low. But I think about the impact that we've been able to just have on people's lives, people at home in my district. One of the most powerful things that I've been a part of is an initiative called Veterans Town Halls, which is, instead of just marching in a parade on Veterans Day, we've taken a concept actually from American Indian history that was written about by Sebastian Junger in his book Tribe, and helped bring veterans and their experiences together with the communities that they served by just giving them an opportunity to share a little bit about what they've gone through and a little bit about how it's affected their lives back home. So the concept is we get together on Veterans Day. We start the very first one in the little town hall in the town where I grew up in Massachusetts. And veterans get up and just share a story for 10 minutes about something you went through overseas that illuminates how you've changed back home. And the main audience is not fellow veterans, but townspeople, people who come in, the same people who have said to me time and time again, Seth, I want to help veterans. I respect their service, even if I disagreed with the war, but I don't even know where to start because I don't get it. I don't even get what they've gone through. This concept has spread across the country now, and there are veterans town halls on Veterans Day all over America, and it grows every year. And I've heard from veterans and from non-veterans what a difference this has made in some lives, and I think that might be what I'm most proud of.
So I heard you and Governor Hickenlooper exchanged nice words back there, saying you would get a beer
absolutely.
at some point. But you did say that you disagreed with him, that very first question of what would it take to defeat President Trump. He said not much, according to people I've talked to in Iowa and on the campaign trail. Tell me about why you think that's wrong.
That has not been my experience in going to Middle America. I think Donald Trump is going to be much harder to beat than a lot of Democrats like to think. And I think that's why we need to be willing to take him on some of the tough issues. You know, I got into this race saying that I'm willing to challenge the president, not just on his job as president, but on his leadership as commander-in-chief. Because I think that he's failed in a lot of regards. But no Democrat right now is really calling him out on that. You know, we're not talking about issues about how Democrats are going to make this country stronger, more secure, about what it means to truly be a patriot and stand up for American values, both at home and abroad. For too long, I think Democrats have ceded these issues to Republicans, and they're actually where Trump's weakest, so we've got to be willing to take him on there. But it's also a story about just the fact that this president's not going to be easy to beat in an economy that at least by the top line numbers is doing well. He's an incumbent. There's a huge advantage there. And there are a lot of people across this country who are worried about where our party might be headed. I mean, I think there is a problem with the fact that I get asked now for the first time ever, Seth, are you a socialist? I mean, when I was elected just 5 years ago, I never got that question. And the fact that I have to be asked that and say, no, I'm not a socialist, I'm a Democrat.
You think that's
concerning.
Trump's effective campaigning?
Well, here's the thing.
Here's
the thing. Trump has gone to his extremes. He has gotten to where he is by purely playing to his base. And if Democrats respond by doing the same thing, by just playing to our base, one, I think it's going to be hard to win, but two, I think it's going to be hard to do anything, even if we do. And so we've got to get leaders up there who are interested in bringing the country together, who are willing to call out their own party when we're not doing the right thing for the country, who are willing to take on the Washington establishment. You know, I haven't met a single voter who's said, Seth, you know, I just wish you'd be a little bit more establishment, you know? Just get in line a little bit more in Washington, D.C. No, people want change. People are frustrated with Washington. Trump hasn't drained the swamp. He's made it swampier, but that's the right approach. We do need to truly drain the swamp.
I wasn't actually going to ask you about this, but it's a natural segue because not everybody in the room may know you were one of the people who thought that Nancy Pelosi should not be Speaker.
Well, the top three. I called for leadership change at the whole top of our party.
Right. And I've heard that you're not getting that question on the campaign trail, but surely some Democrats don't love that about you.
Sure. But you know what? That's called leadership. It's being willing to take a tough position if you think it's the right thing to do. I don't just talk about a new generation of leadership, I fight for it. And as a result of having that democratic conversation, I mean, remember, it is actually an election to become Speaker, not an appointment. We got the climate change subcommittee. We got the voting rights subcommittee. We got term limits on leadership that are going to allow this historically diverse class of freshmen a chance to actually lead our party, to make sure that their voices are heard. And I think that makes us a stronger party. I think it will make us a stronger country. And it will give Democrats leaders that we can look to and not just say, we're great at taking on Trump, which, by the way, Speaker Pelosi deserves a lot of credit for. She has been great at taking on Trump. But I also want leaders that people look to and say, that's the future of the Democratic Party. That is the future of America.
So back to Trump. You actually...
He's hard to avoid, isn't he?
Well, and I'm fascinated. Somebody sent me some comments. You said when he had just won Massachusetts primary in 2016, but hadn't won the nomination yet, and you were sort of warning about him, effectively comparing him to a demagogue, and suggesting that people should read up on Hitler's Germany. Mm-hmm. And I wonder how you think that discussion holds up now that you've seen him govern.
Well, I mean, people criticized me for making that comparison at first, and then there was a surprising number of Republicans who came out and said the same thing. The reality is that it's easy at a conference like this to just look at the top line numbers of the economy, to just realize the returns are good and we haven't gone into a recession like planned and think that everything is okay, and forget that the President of the United States has a mantle of moral leadership for the world and for our country right here at home. And leadership matters. If there's one lesson that I learned from Iraq, it's the power of leaders to make a difference. Leadership matters. Don't think that it doesn't matter what Trump said after Charlottesville, praising good people on both sides. Don't think it doesn't matter that he continually tries to divide us to strengthen his political base. Don't think it doesn't matter that he is so willing to cozy up to people like Vladimir Putin, Kim Jong-un across the globe, and yet disparage our allies, disparage American heroes like John McCain. How much do you think it helps recruiting for a next generation of Americans to serve this country when they hear how the President of the United States treats an American hero like John McCain? Don't think that stuff doesn't matter. I think it's time we return some moral leadership to the Oval Office. I think it's time that we get a true patriot to be the President of the United States.
So Governor Hickenlooper, as you heard, he had some thoughts about the Mueller report and what he would like to see unredacted, et cetera. But you tweeted not so long ago that Trump has clearly committed crimes, profited off his office, violated the Emoluments Clause.
Look,
So,
here's the deal.
what
Governor
next?
Hickenlooper is right that it's probably not politically advantageous for us to have a debate about impeachment in the House of Representatives right now. But I didn't swear an oath when I took this job to my political party. I swore an oath to the Constitution of the United States. And whether you like the politics or not, it's purely on the principles we should be debating this question. And don't tell me that when over 30 of Trump's associates have been indicted as a result of this report, when his own campaign chairman is sitting in prison tonight, don't tell me we shouldn't be having this debate in the House. And frankly, that's why I called for it a year ago, which, by the way, would have been a more politically advantageous time to have it, but it was also just the right thing to do. So I get the politics are hard, but we should be having this debate. Now, Congress does two things. We debate on things, and we vote on them. You should always have the debate first, and that's what we should be doing today. I'm not saying that we should be having an impeachment vote right now, because we don't have all the facts. We don't have the full unredacted version of the Mueller report. So I'm not calling for an impeachment vote, but I am saying that it is our constitutional duty to have this debate.
So if a Democratic president takes office January 2021, what should be the first thing he or she undoes? What should they undo first from the Trump administration?
Well, I think the first message that has to come from the Oval Office, not just to the American people, but to the entire world, is a message of unity, is understanding that the job of the leader of the free world is to bring people together, not to drive them apart. The motto of my division in the Marine Corps was no better friend, no worse enemy than a United States Marine. That should be the motto for our country, where allies trust us, where our enemies trust our resolve, and where everybody here at home knows where the president stands. I would never be a president who expects everybody to agree with me, but I would absolutely expect America and the world to trust me, to trust what I say. That's one of the first lessons you learn in Marine training, is that you can drop out of a run and they'll probably let you run again the next day. You can fail a test, and they'll give you a second chance to retake that test. But you lie about anything, and you're gone that afternoon. That's how important trust and integrity is in being a Marine lieutenant, in being a Marine corporal, a Marine lance corporal, a Marine private. I can't think of a single Marine private or lance corporal who I've ever met in my life who is less trustworthy than the President of the United States. That is a problem.
It's a big statement. As you heard from Jerry Baker, we have the terrible news tonight of a shooting at the UNC campus in Charlotte. There sounded like there were at least 2 fatalities, and I would like your thoughts on gun control. Obviously, Democrats have made a lot of efforts to put this on the national conversation, particularly in Congress.
Look, I've used guns. I've used assault rifles. I carried an assault rifle every single day in Iraq. Guns have literally saved my life. But weapons of war have no place on our streets or in our schools. And that shouldn't be such a controversial position. Yes, I believe in universal background checks, and they absolutely do make the country safer. There's a very simple chart you can find it on my website, that ranks the states by the severity of their gun laws and how much gun violence they have. Massachusetts has the least gun violence in the country, and we have the strongest gun laws. That's very simple. We should also prevent terrorists from buying guns. That's not illegal right now in the United States of America. We should ban bump stocks. The NRA bans bump stocks from its own headquarters because they're so dangerous. Yet we can't do it in Congress. This is a place where we all know the right thing to do, but we need a little bit of courage. People ask me all the time, Seth, why is Congress so stupid? Why can't Congress do basic things like gun reform? Why does Congress not believe in climate change? And I've only been in Congress a few years, but my observation is that most of my colleagues are pretty smart. What's lacking in Congress isn't intelligence, it's courage. It's just the willingness to take the tough vote, to do the right thing, even if you know some people like the NRA might be against you.
So you have a baby daughter.
I do. I'm so proud of my daughter.
Very beautiful.
6 months old. I'm like the classic new father. I couldn't resist showing her a photo.
But what we're seeing right now with the measles and kind of this freak out and the discussion about vaccinations, what is the message that an elected leader of this country should be putting out there about this?
The message is that it's time for us to believe in science. And this is a public health issue. Not just for your kids if you're one of these anti-vaxxers, but for all the other kids that kid is going to meet. So, of course, Emmy gets her vaccines. By the way, it sucks. I hate seeing her get shots. The deal is my wife and I bring her to the doctor. She leaves the room. I stay with her. I get way at the back of the room, so I'm clearly not associated with the woman sticking the needle in her thigh. And then I rush in and grab her and give her a bottle and make her feel like she's loved. It's painful, but it's the right thing to do. And it's right not just for my daughter, but for all my daughter's friends. It's a public health issue. It's that simple.
This will be my last question. I will point out that 308 days from today is California's presidential primary.
Yeah.
Earlier in the process, I would like all of us Californians to make sure that we matter as much as these early nominating states and have your voice heard. So my important question I'm asking of anyone I meet that's running is, how are you advancing women and people of color within your campaign?
Well, you actually have to take a very conscious effort to doing so. Because here's the reality in politics today. If I just post a job on the internet, probably about 80 or 90% of the applicants will be white males. And so we have a very clear policy in my office, which is that we actively recruit a diverse group of applicants, because we are a stronger organization when we have different people in power. For the last 2 years with my Serve America organization, my senior political person was a woman leading that effort. She's now on maternity leave. My chief of staff in my official office is a woman. We have never even had a single woman be chief of staff of the White House. Think about that. I mean, if that's not discrimination, I don't know what is. But the point is that you have to go and recruit people. What I don't do is say at the end of the day, okay, we're going to pick you because you're a minority, because I want everyone on my team to know that they're there because they're the best candidate, not because of the color of their skin or their gender. But as a result of this effort to go out and find really talented, diverse people with diverse perspectives that make us a stronger team because we don't just see all like each other. As a result of that, we do have a very diverse team, and I'm very proud of that.
Congressman Seth Moulton, thanks for joining us today. Thanks to all of you.
Thank you.